What's up, guys? It's your boy Nimbus here, and today I have a bit of a different video. I'm going to be talking about how to do efficient keybind setups and what my keybinds are, because I do think I've gotten them to a really good spot that I'm really happy with. So yeah, I just wanted to kind of share it, go over it, and kind of go over the principles I use to try and get really efficient keybinds out. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoy the video, and let's get into it. So when it comes to keybinds, there's two things that I think are really important principles that you should carry over no matter what your keybinds are. And the first thing I think is really important is making sure you don't have to move your hands a lot from the original placements. And that's just because you're going to lose APM when you have to move your hands over, and you are going to constantly have to look back for your main placement on your fingers to make sure that you're back at your main spot, right? And the next thing that I think is really important is just ease of access. You should be able to access a majority of your important keybinds without really having to move your fingers that much. So I just kind of want to go in here and show you guys what my current keybinds are, and this is pretty standardized across all my characters. So I have a main keybind setup for my one button classes like Demon Slayer, and then I have a main keybind setup for my combo classes like Moshwan and Kali, or Blaster, which I also play. So this is my mobbing preset. Let me get into my bossing preset here. So this is essentially what I'm running right now. So all of my important skills, my main for most of the time, my fingers are on spacebar, the arrow keys with my right hand, and then my left hand would be spacebar and QWER, because I'm I used to play League of Legends, so that's what I'm really comfortable with. And to me, this keybind setup just makes sense and it feels comfortable for me. So I use my index finger the most, so my main attack is always going to be on R. And so right here for Demon Slayers, we use our just basic attack skill. That's our Demon Lash. And so we use that. And so I keep my main attack on R. Because for a minute of the game, we're on burst. I'm probably going to have to change this when the 2-minute changes come out, just because we end up only being in our burst for a couple seconds. And then we use Demon Impact for the rest of the game. So I might have to switch this around soon. But for now, we spend about half of the time in our burst, so my main attack's on R, and then we spend half the time on off burst, and my off burst attack is Demon Chain. So I put Q as usually my second most important skill, and R as my main attack skill. So the way I have my actual burst set up is I use Z, X, C, V, B, and then I'll just slide my fingers across G, H, J, and then L, semicolon, colon, if I need to. But with buff sequence, we don't really need to anymore, right? So all my burst skills are just on ZXCVB, G, and then sliding down this way, but I leave K for the skills just because that's where I'm used to having it, right? And then so on shift and control, I keep skills that are still important. This is my main burst skill, and it's a key down. And then Chaos Lock is my mobility skill in certain situations. So usually I will use my pinky to get over to shift, and then for control, I'll actually use my right hand index finger from my arrow keys. I'll just tap control on the other side. And then so for abilities that aren't as important but I still need really easy access to, for example, sorry, I just realized I have this on the wrong button. I'll fix that later. For example, my iframes, I keep on W and A. These are my two iframes. And then my other main attack skill, I'll put on E, which is supposed to be Cerberus Chomp, but I was doing Angler Company and I move it over. But I'll just fix that right now, actually, so you guys can get a better idea of it. So yeah, so this is another button I need to press whenever it's off cooldown, when I'm off burst. So Cerberus Chomp is something I also keep. So all of my really important abilities, for the most part, are on QWER, ASDF. I keep my potions on D in case I need to pop them in a pinch. And then this is Fountain. This is one of my wills. I keep another button on T. If I need to reach over and press another button, whenever I need to, I'll press T. And then, so yeah, this is my keybinds for the most part. And then, so someone told me, a bunch of my friends told me that Erda Nova is actually a superior bind to most class binds, which is actually true. The animation is really short, and you can also use it in the air, where a lot of class binds you actually cannot. So that's why I use Erda Nova. And then in a pinch, if I fuck up my bind, so for example, I miss, or the boss does a teleport or becomes invulnerable for a second and I miss a bind, I do have my backup bind on end. So I'll just take my middle finger and I'll just tap end, and I'll go back to keeping it on my arrow keys. But as you can see here, for the most part, when I'm bossing, my fingers do not really have to move off of QWER unless I'm pushing a button on ASDF or 1, 2, 3, 4 or T or G. And they're all really easy for me to access from my original placements where all of my main abilities are, right? So, and then if I'm bursting, the boss is already binded, so I can take my fingers off, run ZXCVBG, and then I will be ready to burst, right? And so I think this is a pretty solid setup in my opinion, just because you don't really have to move your fingers around a lot, and everything you can pretty much access from your original finger placements or your main finger placements, right? And then so obviously my jump's on spacebar and I can interact on Alt, and that's because just in a lot of bosses you need to be able to press Alt. For example, Vihila you need Alt, Will you need Alt. Let's just go through the boss list here where you need interact keys. Who else needs Alt? Lucid, you need Alt for the cleanses. Slime, you need Alt. I think all the lower tier bosses you don't need to interact with stuff. Black Mage, you need Alt. Kalos, you need Alt. Calling, you don't. And then I've never fought Limbo, so I can't really comment on that. But there are a good amount of bosses where you actually need to use the interact key, and it's just a part of the boss mechanics, right? Another thing is that like I recently into like once I got into Black Mage, I just started like using it more frequently. But Hero's Will is actually really useful in a lot of bosses. You can use it to avoid getting like crowd controlled, like stunned, silenced, key reversed. You can use it to avoid a bunch of stuff that's just really annoying to deal with. And I would honestly start getting used to it because it can actually save you in a lot of different pinches. And definitely for Black Mage, you're going to need to start using Hero's Will. So I would get into the like habit of just having these bound somewhere, because they're actually going to become very important when you get into like the later stages of bossing. So this is my setup for just like most of my one button classes. I keep it pretty standardized. You'll always see my bind on either A or S. You'll always see my main attack on R. You'll always see all my buffs on like 3, 4, 5, 6. You'll always see me using jump and alt for interact and spacebar respectively. And then my buffs will always be from Z just sliding my keyboard down, and then up to G if I get to like the B point on my keyboard. So this is like my one button class setups, and then when we get to something like, for example, my Mo Xuan, right? Because Mo Xuan is a combo class, so it requires a lot more buttons. I'll show you guys how I have my thing set up, just so you guys can get an idea too. And so like obviously this isn't a video saying like this is the end all be all, this is the only correct way to have your keybinds, but like I do think this is a really efficient way to have your keybinds, and a lot of like the principles for how you should set up keybinds are like would apply and carry over, right? So if we get onto like my Mo Xuan, for example, the keybinds are more so like this, right? So obviously I would keep my G skills on the F keys, just if my guild had any. Our gangsters, by the way, guys, a lot of people are going to be coming after Challenger World, so if you guys wanted to join like a really chill guild without any like requirements, yeah, gangsters is the move. Yeah. But yeah, so on my Mo Xuan, the keybinds are very simple, or not simple, similar, sorry. So one of the main things is that because there's a lot more buttons on these combo classes, I actually had to sacrifice my D key for my potions up to 4. But for most of my combo classes that have like a bunch of buttons, the potion's always going to be on 4. The backup bind is always going to be on 3. Some toggles are going to be on 1 and 2, and the reason is because my ring finger and my pinky are a lot less dexterous than my middle and index finger. I just use them a lot less, so I put a lot of the like less important skills on 1 and 2. But like 3, 4, 5, I have a lot easier access to because of, you know, how much I use my fingers when I play video games. So I keep all the more important stuff on 3, 4, 5. And then, so yeah, so these are macros, but they're essentially just the punch and the kick for Mo Xuan, which are like their main attacks for when you're comboing. So I use R and all of the keys related to the punch, sorry, to the kick on QWER. So this is the main rotation of stuff. But for bossing, Mo Xuan uses everything, right? So again, the punch is on F. It's just a macro because Mo Xuan has like a little bit of like an animation cancel when you keep it in a macro. And then all of the punch related things are here because for Mo Xuan, you want to like do your basic punch once or twice to empower one of your basic abilities, and then they're all related. So you want to use your kick to empower your kick abilities and your punch to empower your punch abilities. So I have them set up like this. And then same thing, the same principle is still the same. My burst is still ZXCV BGHJ, and then it goes into my Ori. So this is what Moshuan's burst rotation looks like. And then again, I just slide my fingers from ZXCV GHJ, and then my burst is done, right? So it's still pretty standardized. And again, my spaces jump, my alt is interact, and I just have my basic attack for whatever niche situations I need these in to be on control, because it's still semi-easy to access. But yeah, so there are things I can do to optimize this, obviously. Like I could, for example, maybe I could put my Ori on shift and I wouldn't have to slide my fingers as much over. But because it's in my burst, I don't really push it that much, and I don't want to fat finger it by accident. But yeah, this is like something that I do for most of my combo classes. If we were to hop over to my Blaster 2, for example, right? The keybinds are still very similar and the principles still apply. I still have QWER as my main attacks. And I think because Blaster has less overall buttons, even though the APM is really high on this class, it might have a little bit less, but it's still very similar again. So because Blaster has a little bit less buttons, I can keep my potions on D, but my mobility skills are on W and E for bobbing and weaving. My main attack with the Magnum Punch and Double Blast is still on R. T is my mobbing skill in this case. Q is my Bunker Blaster, which is like my it's like a button I press very frequently when I'm doing my rotations on Blaster. My mobility skill, I usually keep it on F. So just same thing with my Demon Slayer. I keep my mobility skills on F. So if I'm playing, like, for example, even Sia, my blink is on F. For Blaster, they have this like dash. For Nightwalker, it's like the back step. I keep that on F too. And then so because I have a lot more like keyboard real estate, if you will, on Blaster, I keep my my Gatling Punch on A, which is one of my main burst abilities. But for the burst, it's still very, very similar. I buff up, I pop my Ori, I then use my bind because Blaster's Ori animation is really long. I use my first burst ability, I use my second burst ability, and then I just go on with it. And then so this G key is like a debuff that Blaster wants to keep up, but because it has so many buttons, I decided to put this debuff on G because it's still very easy for me to reach from R with my index finger. But in that case, it's still pretty efficient, you know what I mean? So yeah, it's kind of what I do for my keybinds, but like obviously I don't expect you guys to, like, you know, copy my keybinds over. I just want you guys to start thinking about, are your keybinds efficient? Are there things you don't need on your keyboard that are like immediately accessible, for example? And are you actually like comfortable playing with the amount of, or like playing the game right now? Like, are the buttons you press like easy? You know, does your pinky hurt after like an hour of playing because you're mashing your pinky as your main attack maybe? Is your jump in a really awkward spot? Now your hand's cramping a little because you're like using QWER as your main attacks, and your thumb's in a little bit of an awkward position when you're pressing your alt key, for example, which for me would probably be my left alt. Or like, are you reaching too far to like lose buttons? You know, are you constantly having to like look at your keyboard and figure out where your main placement is again? Are your hands like constantly pinched, trying to like use like ZXCV as your main attack skills and press the spacebar, you know? But if you're comfortable, you know, keep it going. But at the same time, if you're uncomfortable, it might just be your keybinds. And if you're constantly like realizing you have some downtime when you're like trying to like get your fingers back into the original spot, then maybe you can do some better keybinds. And you know, it's never too late to change your keybinds. I'm constantly changing my keybinds here and there to try and make things a little bit more efficient, a little bit more comfortable. On my Nightwalker, I just did some keybind changes too. But yeah, that's the end of the video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. We're almost at 2K subs, so I would really appreciate it. Any sub counts. And I do stream at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time from Sundays to Thursdays. And I usually go until around reset. But yeah, I'll catch you guys in the next video, and I hope you guys have a wonderful day. Peace!
Got him! Got him!